What is up, you guys? My name is Levi with Alliteration Gaming, and today I have another awesome deck profile for you guys. This time it's going to be the long-awaited, legendary, wow, crazy, exciting top 8 clickbait featuring Stain Deck Profile. Yes, the long-awaited Stain Profile is finally here. I've been talking about this deck for good lord knows how long. It's been one of my passion projects ever since Set 2 dropped. I didn't really have a lot of interest in him initially, played him in draft, and then just totally fell in love, and it didn't take very long for me to know that I had to play a real version of the deck. So, we are playing Stain on the all symbol for today. It is a very weapon focused, very, in theme, right? Can't go around challenging the fakes and, finding the true heroes without weapons, right? Becomes the whole thing. So, speaking of Stain and his whole thing, let's see what he actually does. So, Stain is a 6-hander with 29 health with 2 awesome abilities. His first ability says Enhance, your weapon attack gets 1 speed. Then if it deals damage, your rival loses a health. So, it's really nice. Everything is a little bit faster, and you punish them really well on the half blocks. But his second ability is really why we play him. He says Response Commit. When your rival makes a check to play a card, you can give that check -3. They can fail it, and it won't end the combat phase. And this is only playable if your rival has taken damage this game. So now that they've lost health, if they've taken damage, you don't have to deal the damage. So if they have something that says, like, take X damage or whatever, that would technically activate Stain. But this very thematic. Only once you draw blood can you start locking your opponent's plays up and hacking their checks. This works on them playing an attack, a foundation, an action, anything they have to check for, and also works against their blocks, which is kind of like the true spice of how this deck gets in there. But Stain is only a very small portion of the deck, so let's move him out the way real quick so that we can actually talk about the rest of the deck. So let's get into our attack package. The first move we have is 4 copies of Unwavering Slash. This is probably my favorite attack in the deck. It is a 5 diff weapon charged with powerful 2, 4 mid for 4, but actually like a 5 mid for 5 because of Stain, right? And you can discard a card to build an asset from your discard pile. The discarding is cost, so you can discard an asset and then build it right in. Very good. And then if you've got an asset, you can ready one foundation that hasn't been ready yet and draw a card. This card just pushes a lot of buttons. It does a little bit of everything. It's a nice low block as well. The assets are very much like an alternate win condition for us. We really want to set those up. They factor in heavily into a lot of our plays, so it's really important to get them in as fast as possible, and also just being an attack that does that while also replacing itself and just putting reasonable pressure and readying a foundation if you check bad and you have to commit some stuff for it. Just really good. Does kind of everything we want it to do. Next, we have 4 copies of Binding Cloth Assault. This attack functions very similar to this one in that it's like a very good flow card for our deck. It's got a combo enhance to discard 1 card and then draw 2. So once again, it's basically replaces itself like Unwavering does, which is really nice. And then if you've played an action, it gets +2 speed. So we do play actions in this deck. Sugar Rush is a really big part of how we finish games in this deck, and Sugar Rushing this is really strong. We'll get more into that later, but this is essentially like an alternate finisher, a solid bomb for us, and then also just like sets up our plays and gives us extra cards and helps us dig for the things we need, because this is like a very defensive deck, but Stain's only a 6-hander, so having attacks that leverage that hand size is really important. Next, we have 4 copies of Create Capturing Net. This is a really cool card. It's a 2 low for 4 that combos with a foundation to gain stun 2, and then you can build a foundation from your card pool face up. So you're basically just going to go foundation, play this on a 5, combo, get stun 2, and then bring that foundation down. There's a lot of foundations you can bring down in the middle of your combat phase that can be relevant for your aggression that turn. So it's really nice in that sense. And then just like having attacks that like can stun them as you poke them through the turn to eventually bring your big one in at the end, and then Stain response on their block, and it's just really hard to deal with. It's a very meticulous deck, and when you're trying to set your opponent up for the kill, you're basically trying to mathematically figure out as you go through their turn what they do and don't block so that you can eventually set up that attack that's like a guaranteed lethal in a way, right? So, our next move in a very similar vein is 4 copies of Netgun Surprise. This is simply a 3 mid for 3 attack with stun 2, and then if it's in the card pool, you can remove it when your rival plays an attack to reduce that attack speed to 1. So if they open up with a mid attack, you can get the full block in, and then when they play their next one, you can set it to 1, and I mean, it makes it super easy to block. Alternatively, it leads into a lot more interesting defensive plays, which we'll kind of get into with the foundations, but it's a very versatile card. It's a very powerful card, and it just, it just kind of does whatever you need it to do in those moments. Speaking of bombs, and speaking of Stain, we're finally going to show you a Stain weapon. The big finisher in this deck, but also like flow attack. This tactic is just a very versatile card, is Slashing Whirlwind. This is a 5 mid for 4 that says you can discard 2 momentum to gain 10 damage only if you've dealt damage this combat phase. So that's kind of leads into what we were talking about earlier. You're sending in these pokes, and if they take them, you're stunning 2s along the way because you have these 8 stun 2 attacks, setting them up to where you can just make this unblockable. Stain can make all of these cards really scary, right? Because this is actually a 6 mid for 5. If you give the 10 damage, it's a 6 mid for 15, and then if you factor in Stain's -3 to their check, it's actually like a 9 mid for 15. And essentially, it's very easy for you to just kind of like math things out to the point where you can know for sure if that is an unblockable move or not, and then commit to it. We also have a lot of other ways to pump the damage on this. Like if your opponent plays into this card, they have to constantly play around this card, or it's just going to randomly kill them at certain points. One of the strongest things about this deck is your opponent has to block, always keeping Stain in mind, right? Because Stain's response on block is like, it's like a +3 speed, but only once you actually know if it's going to guarantee you like the value you need to, right? It's going to guarantee your big damage move gets through because they can't commit out for it, or it's going to guarantee that, you know, it kills them, or it's going to guarantee that it makes the rest of your attacks unblockable if they commit out for it. So it's a really cool like floating effect that your opponent just always has to keep in mind, and it's very easy to just like not be able to play around it. Rounding out the last 2 attacks, we got 2 copies of Expert Flurry. This just says combo with a weapon to discard a rival momentum, and you can give your next attack 2 damage. It's a nice 4 high for 4. It's our only high attack, so it kind of breaks up the monotony. We're very telegraphed in mid blocks in this, or in mid zone attacks in this deck. So nicely we have the 1 high with this and the 1 low with this. And again, like, you know, that's kind of one of like, these attacks are all just very value attacks, right? These are all 4 diffs basically. This is really a 4 diff, Unwavering, because it readies 1. They're all 4 diffs, and like they all have 1/1 because of Stain. So we just make this whole attack package actually really threatening, especially in tandem with the rest of our deck and the way we attack people in this deck, which will make more sense once we get to the other cards. But this is our attack package. It's 22 attacks in a 69 card deck, so it's a pretty chunky one, but you have to play assets and actions for the overall core of this deck to function. So it's a bit of a necessary evil that you have to play such a big deck, but you're also not like specifically reliant on any of these attacks in their own right. So you can kind of just, you know, draw your cards, look at what you've got, and then work with it. You know, there's, you know, everything combos with a weapon, but everything is a weapon. So it's very synergistic in its own right. So let's move on to the rest of the deck. Before we get into the foundations, I want to talk about the assets and the actions because they are extremely important to the overall game plan of this deck. So the first thing we're doing is we're playing 4 copies of Quick Create. This card is amazing. So it's going to be a weapon asset. It's got Breaker 1, but more importantly, it's got 2 enhanced abilities. The first one is to commit, put the top card of your discard pile into your card pool to give your attack +2 or -2 damage. So this has a lot of different applications as far as pumping our attacks or minusing our opponent's attacks, putting specific things that we want in the card pool, setting up combos and stuff like that, and also just working into a lot of it. It's a really core piece of our defensive and aggressive plays, and you really just want all 4 on board ASAP. It's also got a sick deadlocked first enhance to commit and double your weapon attack speed and damage. So this is one of those like you're actually not allowed to go into deadlock because you will just super duper die. Really good card. We'll talk more about plays with it as we get into the rest of the cards, but it's a very core piece of our gameplay. Then to round out the assets, we have 2 copies of Box Full of Babies. These are really just in there because I wanted to play 6 assets. I've played a lot of games with this deck, and with 6 assets, I pretty much never not have one in my hand and or discard pile for Unwavering on turn 1. So 6 assets is really a very consistent number for these ratios. But this card does have some applications. It says enhance once per turn. You can draw a card and then discard a card if you're not Hatsume Mei. This is just still a really nice filter for us, and it sets up our discard pile. And then we can commit it to give our tech or weapon attack 1 speed and 1 damage. So stuff like that can stack up really fast. Again, a lot of very incidental damage pump. Stain also gives it 1/1 essentially, so you can, you know, like I said, things stack up really fast, and your not so threatening attacks can become very threatening very quickly. Speaking of things becoming very threatening very quickly, the actions. We're playing 4 copies of Sugar Rush Power Up. This card is honestly just nuts. This card's nuts. I don't think I can play this deck without this card. It's very, very, very integral to how we close out games in this deck. So, it's got two abilities. I'll talk about the less important one first. It has Enhance, Remove, Flip a rival foundation with an ability that reduces the damage of an attack. There are a lot of very relevant foundations that do that right now, like Spooky and Challenging the Fakes, so it's a nice card to have, but more importantly, it says Enhance, remove 10 cards from your discard pile to give your attack 2 speed and 4 damage. So right away, in tandem with Stain, we can make anything very, very threatening. Obviously, the dream, right, is Sugar Rush onto Whirlwind. It becomes a, 5, 6, 7 speed, 8 speed with Stain, and if we Stain response, 11 speed mid for 14, 19, 20 damage. That's insane. You can just like one-shot. You can just like one-shot a 7-hander. And it's really, really, really hard to block in tandem with the Stain response. So it's really crazy on that. But then you can honestly just put it on any attack and it can become very unblockable. Like in tandem with Stain, with its +1 speed and then -3 to their block check, you can essentially factor in 6 speed to any move, and that's just almost always going to make a move unblockable, save stuff like evade and copy and plus ultra and whatnot, right? And you just play around those cards as best you can as you approach matchups that may or may not have them. But like I was saying before, if you do it on Binding Cloth Assault, it gives it 2 speed and 4 damage. Then it gets 2 speed on its own because you played an action. Then it gets 1 speed with Stain. So it's like a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mid for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with Stain. Boom's an 8 mid for 10, and then if you Stain response the block, it's actually like an 11 mid for 10. So a really, really, really nice bomb. Like mid-game, that's most of the time how I'll get like my first big chunk of damage in and then try to close it out from there. And then if you really need to close a bigger number, you can do it on a Slash and Whirlwind, or an Unwavering with a couple powerfuls on it is nice too. And then you can pump stuff from there further with stuff like Quick Create and Box Full of Babies. And then we also play things like start with the basics, right? As you can see, basically just trying to manipulate your opponent into a position where you can drop this bomb and it's just unblockable in tandem with the Stain response. So very, very important card to executing a game plan like that. I'll put the Sugar Rushes down here, I think. Since our attacks, assets, and actions, let's get on to the very, very important foundations, because these attacks and Stain are most of the time how we kill people. But the foundations are mostly how we stay alive, and there's a lot of very, very cool interactions within our character and these cards to make sure that we stay alive. So, first thing, we have 4 copies of Specialist of Sound. This is, just an age-old, one of the best defensive pieces in the game. When your rival plays an attack, commit it to give it -3 speed, and then when you check it, you get to peek at the top card of your deck if you so desire. So, just a great card, -3 speed to everything is very strong. It's very, very powerful in tandem with Spooky plays, which we'll get to later, but, kind of just a 4 of in all of its symbols no matter what. Then we've got one of our best defensive pieces, 4 copies of Challenging the Fakes. Basically, this card does not have a block mod, but it has a very, very powerful ability where you can flip it to give an attack -1 damage. Then if the attack is not blocked, your rival's next check to play an attack, and only an attack, gets -2. So it's like Breaker, but they can't play around it if they want to keep swinging. And in tandem with stuff like Quick Create for -more damage and Spooky, it's really easy to make an attack 0 damage, especially if it's a throw. Make their attack 0 damage, take it, and then their next check to play one gets -2. Then you may or may not have already stained that turn as well, so they're having to deal with like more than one check hack a turn, which is just really strong, especially if you start doing like breaker blocks and stuff with it too. So really, 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 really good card. Next, we have 4 copies of Villains Defeated. This is a really, really nice card. It says, after you discard any number of cards due to your rival's effect, you can flip it and draw a card, playable while committed. That's a pretty nice effect, but we mostly play it because when you block your rival's attack, you can flip this to remove the attack and gain 2 health. So this is really, really nice when you block throws, because you get to heal probably most of the half damage it dealt back, and then also remove it from the game, so it's gone forever, and they don't get any momentum out of it. We have a lot of ways to deal with throws in this deck over time, and it's really, really strong. And then also just healing in our defensive deck is quite powerful. Then we've got 3 copies of Hero Killer. I absolutely love this foundation. It's got 2 very relevant abilities. The first one is Response Remove. When your rival builds or unflips something, you get to remove it. So basically, this disappears forever, and whatever you built disappears forever. There's a lot of really powerful targets, Excited for Bloods, Rescue Completeds, Wall Clings, Stronger in Darknesses. There's just so many foundations that are really, really threatening, and just having as long as you built this first before they built it, you just get to hey, snipe it, get it out the way. And then it has a very scary Deadlock First Form where you can remove it. Your weapon attacks gain stun 2 for the rest of this combat phase. That's insane. Like if you have like one of these on board and then a quick create or two, your opponent just can't go into deadlock. It's just not really an option for them. And that's one of my favorite things about playing Stain with the all symbol is having such threatening deadlock abilities. Basically says if your rival can only play with 10 foundations, with a Stain response every turn cycle, they're actually only playing with like 7 foundations. And then if you're using just anything else, like it's very, very pressuring and lets you kind of, you know, build to deadlock all day and deal with their stuff, and they're kind of only allowed to stay at 10, which because your Stain is kind of like less than 10 because they're gonna have to commit extras or just lose their cards every turn. Then we have 2 copies of Spooky. This is a unique foundation that says commit to switch the speed and damage of your rival's attack. This is such a powerful defensive piece. If they play a throw, you can easily give it -3 speed with Specialist. It's now going to be like, probably going to be like a -1 speed throw now, or a 0. Then you can just Spooky and make it 0 damage. If they have some incidental damage pump, you can get like another -1 with Challenging, another -2 with Quick Create, stuff like that. It's a crazy card. I've considered bumping it up to 3, maybe taking out like a 4th villains or something like that for it. It's just a really, really, really good defensive piece, and you really want to see it very often. It's great with Capture Net as well. You can block with the Capture Net, and then they play their attack. You set its speed to 1. You Spooky it. It's now a 1 damage move. Flip Challenging, make it a 0, take 0, and then their next check sucks. Very, very, very powerful plays right there. Then the last non-spam foundation we have is 2 copies of Start with the Basics. This just says commit, your weapon gets a speed and 2 damage. It's just nice, like incidental damage pump that sits there and lies in wait until you're ready to play your big bomb. You know it'll go through because you've done the math, and then it just, you know, deals a bajillion damage. It's nice with Unwavering as well. If you bank the 5 check opening with an Unwavering, you can commit this for a speed and 2 damage, then use it as you're ready your 1 foundation and draw a card. It's nice. I would never play more than 2. It's not a card we're reliant on. It's a very, very like win more card, but sometimes it is that bit of damage pump to get you there, especially in tandem with stuff like Quick Creates, Babies, and Sugar Rush Power Up. So, moving on to the spams, we got 4 copies of Destined for Mainstream Success. Again, another like 4x staple if you're playing the all symbol. Flip to name a card type, reveal the top card of your deck. If it matches, you get to add that type to your hand. You know, we can scout stuff with Specialist with Sound if we know our checks, and most of the time, I'm just going to essentially use it to say, okay, I'm just going to name attack with it all day because I really want to play an attack on like a 5 or a 6, but only if I know that I'm going to check well for it. So you name attack, you pick up a free attack, you name attack, reveal a foundation, cool, you know you're getting a good check there. So you can proceed with your turn in a greedy fashion because you have that knowledge. It's just always good. Then we play 4 copies of Preparing for Battle. This is a pretty underwhelming card. However, it is an off block with Breaker 1, but it just says commit, discard a card, and draw a card. We don't do like Rising Starlet shenanigans in this deck. I don't really think you have the room for it, but it's really just in here because it's a low block. It's a low block. It has Breaker 1. Like for a card that exists like only as a low block in our deck, it having Breaker 1 is like the best part about it. And then sometimes if we like scout our check with Specialist or just like are digging for things, it's a nice filter if we just want to get cards that aren't particularly useful out of our hand. Then we got 2 copies of Zoom. This is another nice low block spam, but also it says all response. When your combat phase begins, reveal the top card of your deck. So if it's like a bad check, you can like open with a foundation, then go into like a Capture Net. If it's a good check, you can open with like your higher diff Unwavering or something like that. It's just nice information, and it's also got a deadlock form to flip and look at your rival's hand. So once again, another very, very pressuring and powerful deadlock that just kind of stops your opponent from being able to go into that state. Then for the 0 diffs, we got 4 copies if it can't be fixed. This says when one of your cards is committed from a rival effect, you can flip this and build the top card of your deck face down. Playable while committed, so it's just really nice stun protection, and it's a 1 high block on a 0, which is just great. And in a very similar vein, we've got Rooftop Vantage, 0 with a 2 low block that says we can flip and look at the top card of our rival's deck. This actually comes in really clutch sometimes because if you need to do the math and figure out if your bomb is going to be unblockable before you full commit to it, you can peek at the top card of the deck. If you see a 3, you know you can make them check a 0, and then you can kind of plan out however hard you commit to the attack from there. And so guys, that is the main deck. It is a 69 card main deck. It's got 22 attacks, so it's pretty much standard ratios there. Like I said, you got to play a very big deck because you play all of these actions and assets. They're very integral to your game plan. They make your hands a little weird sometimes, but that's where a lot of your filtering comes in. And they're all kind of useful at some ways. Even stuff like Sugar Rush really early. If you don't have the 10, you can flip powerful things that reduce your damage. So that's the main deck, guys. That's just kind of like a very general overview of how the deck plays, how your attack strings are going to go. It's a very weird deck to play. You really end up kind of like, you want to get that first poke in, turn your character response online, and then just try to control the flow and tempo of the game from there. You generally play very slowly, very methodically, trying to sculpt a great attack turn to where you can eventually just kind of go in your opponent, get all your quick create set up, get your Sugar Rush, get whatever kind of bomb you need, right, to go in on them and close out the game from there. Only once you know you're able to close out the game from there. It's a very defensive deck, but it can also pump out a lot of damage out of nowhere, especially if your opponent's not ready for it and doesn't know how to block around Stain's response. So yeah, guys, that's the main deck. I do have a sideboard I want to talk about as well. First thing in the sideboard is what you're probably thinking is missing from the main deck. 4 copies of Capture Evildoers. This card is so good. Being able to remove a rival momentum, you get to pick, and then if you do remove one, you get to add the top card deck to your momentum, and it's also got a form to discard a momentum to pitch 3 cards from your card pool. Lets you do some really crazy attack strings, and then snipes really key momentum pieces from your opponent. It's a very good card, and I wish it was in the main deck, but I would have to play a much bigger deck if I was going to play more actions, because you have to play 4 Sugar Rush. It is how you close out games in this deck. But it's definitely going to be in the sideboard as a very key removal momentum piece against those air decks and stuff like that. Then we have 3 copies of You're So Obvious. This just says you can destroy it to return an attack to its printed speed or damage. And then if it's a punch, you give it +2 to the stat that you didn't reset, which is fine because if you're going to take it, you don't care about the speed. If you're going to block it, you don't care about the damage. So it's just a nice thing to protect us from the occasional bombs. Then we've got 2 more copies of Expert Flurry. This is our attack right here. I just saw these as a little bit of extra momentum hate. It's nice if you got, Monetas and stuff running around at your locals or any of the air decks. You have a lot of momentum hate in this whole package. Most of the time when you're fighting an air deck, you're going to be siding almost the general majority of your sideboard, so it's really nice. Then we have a 3rd copy of Spooky, just for the matchups where your opponent's able to flip it or destroy it or just deal with it in some way. You want to make sure you can replace it, or against matchups where you just really want to see it, you can bring that 3rd one in. And so that is the whole of the sideboard. Now I do have a couple cards that I want to talk about that might make their way or are already making their way into the deck. This is specifically the exact list that I played in the provisionals at Origins. I think it was provisional number 4? No, number 5. Number 3. Provisional number 3, because I played in the first one on day 2. So this is specifically the list I played for that provisionals, but there's already a couple changes I want to make. First things first is Ultra Compression Weights. This is a card that I want to put into the deck. It basically says when your attack deals damage, you can commit it to pick a rival foundation. While this is committed, it stays committed. So you can lock down really important pieces for them. And then again, when you're Stain and they can only have 10, they actually only have 7 because of your response. They actually only have 6 when this is on board. I would probably cut 1 box of babies to put this in, and just 1 of each of them. It's nice because you can play tech assets because you get to fish it out with Unwavering. Really cool. You can just grab it if you need it. I really want to bring it into the deck. So then going on to alternate attacks. Invincible Clasp as a throw is one that made its way in and out of the deck a lot. It's basically just a 3 damage throw in this deck. You can lose 2 and make it a little bigger, and also cancel rival enhances by pitching momentum. But for the most part, the goal with this in the deck before was just play 4 of it, try and find it turn 2, send it in, turn Stain on, and then build from there, which is really nice. There were the main games that I lost throughout the day were games I lost because I wasn't able to turn Stain online quick enough, and I just kind of was a vanilla 6-hander for a long time. So this is probably going to make its way back into the deck. It's probably going to replace the Expert Flurry, and then maybe 1 of each of these or something like that. But basically, I really liked it in the deck, and it's probably going to find its way back in just as a nice tempo card. And late game, you can do stuff like giving it 3 damage, Sugar Rush it, quick create it, pump a lot of damage, and if they're at, the half health, right, you can just, kill them automatically with it. And then also, it's nice because like you can side it out against stuff like Faith Shield matchups and Welcoming matchups and things like that. So, but that's probably gonna make its way back in the deck. The rest are just really like tech attacks. Piercing Descent's cool if you want like a big damage move. Wire Arrow is nice for asset hate. Bow Staff is nice to pick up your assets, but without Starlit, it doesn't have a ton of options in this deck. But it's still a nice +1 sometimes. And Improvised Blade is a really cool deadlock pressure piece, and also like Pseudo Bomb. These are all cool attacks at the moment. I think because like I feel like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 attacks are staple in some numbers. So you really only have one like tech slot. And I don't think it can be one of these. I think either the Flurry is the best of these tech slots. Really depends on your meta, or unless you just want to go with the Throw for turning Stain online quicker. Then aiming for number 1 is a really cool foundation to make your rival discard cards, especially in like a control deck like this is, but your non-spam space is really tight, so it's hard to fit in. Same thing goes with Night Watch, being able to cancel their abilities I really liked, but you only play 4 actions and they all remove themselves, and also the space on your non-spams is very, very tight. Same thing about Rising Starlit basically. The plays with it are cool, but they can be a little awkward and don't always come up, and like it only being able to do it on your turn is just awkward. You know, you want to be Momo, but you're just really not Momo. I think Celebrity Status is a very, very cool card. Being able to, you have a lot of things that say draw 1 in this deck, so being able to stack really key attacks on top and then fishing them back out with this was a really, really cool idea. Your spams are just very dedicated to your block zones because there's not a lot of lows in this deck, and so your spams are kind of locked up supporting those, and then there's not really other slots for you. Evade and Copy is another really, really cool sideboard piece, since we can't really play plus ultras very effectively in this deck. Right now, I like to side the You're So Obvious as the answer to like really big bomb attacks, but this is another nice option as well. And then Intimidating Presence is another nice spam, just being able to like counter them when they ready or flip foundations. I'm sorry, when they ready foundations, being able to flip them, you know, just take out their amphibious and stuff like that. It's a neat card, but once again, it's a spam with a mid block, and the spams are really fighting for all of our block zone space, and you're never kind of destined for mainstream success. So guys, that is my full report on this Stain Deck Profile. I'm going to try to have some more games coming up with it, but I have a ton of videos that I want to make post Vegas and Origins. This is the one I was just most excited to get out because I've been talking about and testing this deck for a really long time, and I kind of wanted to wait and see if I could get Stain's first top cut slot in with it before I profiled it out. And so here it is, you guys. If you have any comments or feedback on the deck, please let me know. If you're playing Stain yourself, if you're one of the few, the proud, the Marines, and are joining me trying to make this character get there, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. But for now, guys, that is going to be Levi with Alliteration Gaming. Thank you all so much for watching this deck profile, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Bye-bye.